The Persephone Foundation. Timeline Archives. Timeline Designation Sigma Nu-016. Codenamed Hugbox. Welcome to the future, where everyone is lovely and kind and gets along with everyone else. Or else. At least, that's how it is in the United Earth government. And if you don't like it, well, you're obviously some sort of evil oppressor who should move to the counter-UEG states. Or, better yet, kill yourself. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the West had believed it had reached the end of history. Then, in 1993, a series of events began which culminated in the end of the first United States of America. The Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, was besieged by federal authorities, and they, as Branch Davidians today insist, miraculously, escaped from the flames that engulfed their compound. This attack, followed by the bombings of federal buildings in Oklahoma City and Atlanta, led to a major crackdown on the militia movement. This paranoia only became worse after the attack on the World Trade Center in 2002, pulling the United States into a series of wars against Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran. The Second Depression in 2011 led to the fall of the Chinese Communist Party and the further destruction of economic security in the world. Crackdowns and riots became commonplace across the country, with extremists on both sides gaining the limelight. The United States practically collapsed as none of the four presidential candidates won the 2016 election, and Congress handed victory to the two establishment candidates. The Republican gained the presidency, and the Democrat won the vice presidency. Neither candidate was popular with the people, and as the situation degraded, civil unrest became even worse. By 2017, the country was in full-blown civil war. Meanwhile, the Russian Federation, already a weakened husk of its former Soviet self, attempted to take advantage of this weakness by reclaiming Belarus and Ukraine by force. In what is now known as the Eurasian War, they were defeated by what remained of NATO in Europe, but only after a long conflict which led to the rise of the European Federation. The Second American Civil War ended with the country divided between a conservative South and two liberal states, Cascadia and the North American Republic. The Middle East was left in shambles, with the Islamic State dominating former Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, before the European Federation invaded and cleaned the place up. The European Federation was the big winner. By 2030, the Chinese and Americans were still repairing, while the Russians were under their boot. The EF knew what had caused the problems of the past few decades: nationalism, capitalism, and hate. Of course, the Soviet model was not to be followed. Communism had failed in the USSR and China, after all. So a new path should be taken. A path of peace, tolerance, social justice, and equality. Gradually, although with growing rapidity, society would be remodeled so that everyone in Europe, and then the entire world, was a nice, docile progressive. Around the world, nations followed the EF model. Not only did the world's last functioning economy condition its aid on adopting its principles, the EF also became used to flexing its military muscles. Humanitarian regime changes became the norm throughout the 21st century, and became the catalyst for the formation of the other global federations. One notable exception to the model is the NAR and Cascadia. Both states were enamored by the progress the EF was making, and thus adopted their policies with zeal. The UEG is a contradiction. It's not really united, it doesn't encompass the whole Earth, and its structure is so ill-defined that it may not even be a government. The UEG is the product of the political integration that began as early as the 1950s, with the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community. The UEG is a federation of federations, with the ultimate goal of erasing all social, cultural, and economic divisions. Civilian weapons ownership is restricted. Gun control was taken for granted, of course, but why stop there? Baseball bats and arrows can kill too, and who uses those for sport outside of the American South? And isn't it totally reasonable to also have background checks on steak knife owners? A progressive tax was instituted, with the top 10% paying 90% and the lowest tax bracket at 40%. Can't have those rich fat cats not distributing their fair share, now can we? That a lot of this money was squandered by corrupt EF politicians was no matter. Also ignore the fact that the poorer members of the UEG do not have cradle-to-grave benefits, so their workers can toil from cradle to grave so that the EF's people can live large. Democracy, of course, is important and a guaranteed human right, but anyone who opposes the ruling Progressive/Labor/Social Democratic Party or any parties in their coalition was obviously a bigot of some description, so those parties can be safely banned. Anti-government speech is also deemed problematic, and the EF is gradually instituting a new, sanitized version of English for everyone to speak. This new speech is extremely simplistic, so that everyone could learn it, and so that it's difficult to express certain ideas without using problematic language. Even religion is not exempt, and is attacked as being a tool of oppression. Recently, Islam has joined Christianity in this group. To ensure that all peoples are equally represented in government and business, quotas were passed to ensure that at least half of every corporate board of directors and every legislature on Earth was composed of women, with the appropriate percentages of ethnic minorities as well. And just because of the historical oppression visited upon them, ethnic minorities and non-heterosexuals get preferential quotas and treatment everywhere. Of course, ignore all the rich, old white men who claim to be black transgender lesbians to take advantage of these laws. You don't know how they identify. And ignore the fact that it's still rich white people in charge of the UEG. They know what's best for everyone else, and they have your best interest at heart. Drug use and vapid entertainment is commonplace. Rather than addressing personal problems, why not take some antidepressants and keep up with the newest social media trends? Better than paying attention to what's actually going on. Anybody who speaks out about this state of affairs is clearly a bigot, and bigotry is antisocial and illegal, so they are thrown in jail. Or, more likely, they are socially ostracized and forced to live in the streets as a beggar, because nobody can hire such a person. Who could oppose this utopian vision? The counter-UEG states do. These regressives are despised by the UEG, and are frequently the subject of demonization. In the UEG, everyone is supposed to be happy. Until counter-UEG powers are brought up, and then the hatred is allowed to flow. The UEG frequently launches invasions of counter-UEG insurgents around the world. But given that the counter-UEG states are armed with nuclear weapons and orbital railguns, they are off-limits. The counter-UEG states are an eclectic mix of not-so-nice states. China, the unofficial leader of the bloc, is an outright dictatorship, one that has become strongly Christian. The fall of the Communist Party and the chaos that followed opened the door for Christianity in China, although the form it takes is very syncretic. The Second American Federation, the conservative remnant of the First United States, is still a democracy, albeit it is as democratic as the EF. There is a constant scare for globalists, and anybody who criticizes the government is quickly blacklisted. The Valentine Federation, a union of Israel and Palestine, has become a surprisingly successful Jewish-Muslim mix, one that despises the radical secularism of the UEG. The others are bog-standard dictatorships. In Oceania, the Republic of Oceania forms a third block. The product of the Indonesian Revolution, Oceania is a horrific, highly militarized Orwellian state. During its early years, Oceania destroyed all vestiges of Indonesian, Malaysian, Australian, and Kiwi culture, replacing it with its strange neo-Maoism. Other rogue states include the Empire of Zaire, which models itself off the Roman Empire, and the fundamentalist Christian Republic of West Africa, which is currently waging a crusade against infidels in its borders. Points of interest. Alaska, too full of ornery cusses to be worth integrating into the NAR during the Great Crisis. And Alaskan troops were very effective against the NAR during the Alaska War of 2039 through 2041. While highly critical of the NAR and Cascadia and close to China, Alaska keeps in mind to remain neutral. Even their military exercises keep the OPFOR unnamed, despite the fact that they use NAR equipment. The Midwestern Federation has been on-again, off-again with its NAR and SAF neighbors. Nowadays, the money in the NAR is too much to ignore, and the decline of the American Federation is as well. Deseret takes its armed neutrality seriously. Their words are backed with nuclear weapons. Where did they get the nukes? Well, the American Federation lost some. The Caribbean states of the NAR are a frequent vacation destination for the rich and powerful. Gitmo is now a museum to demonstrate how horrible the former United States was. As punishment for the UK's resistance to joining the EF, the Malvinas have been turned over to Argentina. This also helped get the Argentines to convince the rest of the South American Union to hop on the UEG wagon. Northern Italy was more in line with the EF's centralization, and its policies in general. The South was more reluctant, and its continued resistance to the UEG deal keeps it away from the rest of Western Europe. The Republic of Muscovy has adopted social justice democracy with unprecedented zeal, tearing down all symbols of Russian nationhood. This has even been extended to attacking the Orthodox Church, which is now in real danger of dying out in the former Russian Federation. Kurdistan and Assyria are both products of the Syrian-Iraqi conflict of 2011 through 2021. Both are relatively secular, but Islamists are still depressingly common and are allowed to preach their message of hate, which often includes calling for the return of the Islamic State to kill the unbelievers wherever they may be. The Republic of Algeria invaded the collapsing Islamic Republic of Morocco in the 2050s, with EF support. There's still Moroccan nationalist groups desiring secession from Algeria, but nobody listens to them. The Congo Rainforest War hasn't actually ended, and is still sucking up UEG peacekeepers and East African soldiers. Naturally, some European and North American arms dealers are becoming very, very rich from this. And a few demonstrations of orbital weapons have been made to show the counter-UEG bloc what the UEG is capable of. South Africa broke apart during the South African Civil War of 2048 through 2054, ending in the EF-backed Republic of South Africa facing off against the Oceania-backed People's Republic of South Africa. Both sides have nukes and orbital weapons platforms, making tensions all the greater. The Kingdom of Hejaz, ruled by the Caliph from Mecca. Although officially neutral, the Caliph does whatever the EF wants, just like the Pope does. The Republic of Iran was defeated by the EF during the Euro-Iranian War of 2038 through 2039, which was the last hurrah of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's a staunch ally of the EF, thanks in part to the rebuilding of Iran after the war. The EF made sure the propaganda ran deep into society, and that the Islamic Republic's leadership was punished for its many crimes. The Turkestan Federation, a product of the fall of the Russian Federation. Afghanistan is now one of the more peaceful areas in the world, although there is still a major societal divide between Afghans and the descendants of Pakistanis who fled the fall of Pakistan. Former Pakistan is still a mess, as Indian authorities are not very interested in rebuilding it. This is the heart of modern Islamic radicalism, which is fused with neo-Bolshevist rhetoric coming from Oceania. The Russian Republic is still very bitter about the Eurasian War and the fall of the Russian Federation. Here, Russian nationalism is alive and well, with many Russians being direct descendants of those who've moved out of Western Russia. They want to reunite the Russian Federation and destroy the UEG, making them quite a bit more belligerent than their Chinese allies. After the fall of North Korea, the South Koreans reunited the peninsula, and were bankrupted by it. The Chinese bankrolled the rebuilding, and in exchange, Seoul is now well within Beijing's sphere. The Chinese have also promoted anti-Japanese sentiment among the Koreans. Filipino communists finally had their day when the Oceanians decided to topple the diplomatically isolated Filipino government. The People's Republic of the Philippines still remains staunchly Catholic, although the local cardinals do toe the party line and denounce the Pope in Rome on a regular basis. This has been a Persephone Foundation timeline reading. Thank you for listening.